What if tonight your home could change with something as simple as a whisper? Something aligned to bring you this message. And not everyone will understand. Now whisper these words. What is meant for me is coming to me. Before we continue, take a moment to breathe with me. Because there is something that very few people have noticed about one of the most well-known texts in the Bible. Many read it. Many repeat Italiano. But almost no one understands what really happens when it is spoken with the right intention. And in a few minutes, I'll show you something that most people overlook when reciting Psalm 23. Something that can transform the atmosphere of your home. But that key piece, you'll only understand it at the end of first. Let your mind calm down. Relax your shoulders for a moment. Take a deep breath. And while you listen to these words, imagine something very simple. Imagine a quiet room. Warm light enters through a window. There's a door in front of you. Behind that door lies the version of your life where peace, stability, and clarity reign. You don't need to force it. You're just walking towards her. Because something many people discovered too late is that inner peace is not just an emotion. It is a spiritual sign. And when peace reigns in a home, many other things begin to fall into place. Perhaps you know this from experience. That you have experienced moments where uncertainty seemed to fill every corner. Moments where the silence became heavy. Moments when it seemed that the answers were taking too long. You have waited longer than others, imagine. And in the midst of that waiting, many wonder if they are really being heard. But here something powerful appears. A truth that appears repeatedly in the scriptures. True provision begins within before it manifests on the outside. That is why Psalm 23 begins with a surprising statement. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. It's not a phrase of anxiety. It is not a phrase of despair. It's a phrase of absolute trust. Look at this. This psalmist does not say maybe. It doesn't say I wish. It says something different. She speaks from a place of quiet certainty. And that certainty produces something that many people forget to cultivate peace. The next line of the psalm confirms it. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Rest and don't. Quarende, run, don't despair, dot rest. Dot, and here a profound revelation appears. When a person lives constantly under tension, their mind becomes filled with noise. That noise blocks clarity. It blocks wisdom. It blocks the ability to see the opportunities that God places before you. But when peace returns, everything changes. The mind becomes organized, decisions are improving, perception expands. That's why many ancient spiritual traditions taught something very specific. Sacred words should not only be read, they must be spoken with intention, even in a low voice, like a whisper. Because when you whisper something, your mind enters a different rhythm. Your breathing changes, your nervous system calms down, your attention focuses. And in that state, the message of the psalm ceases to be just a text. It becomes an experience. Psalm 23 begins to act as an internal guide, not just as a reading that observe another powerful aspect. He leads me beside still waters. Calm waters have always been symbol of mental clarity. Where the water is still, you can see the reflection But when the water is turbulent, nothing is distinguishable. The same applies to the human mind. If everything is turbulent inside, it's difficult to perceive the right direction. And this is where many people discover something unexpected. When a home begins to fill with calm, decisions that once seemed confusing become clearer. Conversations change, reactions change. Even the way we face challenges changes, because peace is not passivity, it's alignment. And the psalm goes on to say something even deeper. It will comfort my soul. Comfort means restore, fix, reorder. That sometimes we believe that transformation occurs when circumstances change, but it often happens earlier, inside the heart. That's why so many people who study biblical texts in depth notice something fascinating. Spiritual confidence produces inner stability, and inner stability changes the way we live every area of life. That's why when Psalm 23 is whispered with intention, something begins to happen in the atmosphere of a home. It's not magic, it is spiritual alignment. It's about remembering who leads the way. But something is still missing. There is a phrase within the psalm that reveals the true key to all of this. Most people overlook it, and when you understand what it truly means, you will understand why so many people have found deep peace by uttering these words. And that we'll see in a moment, because the most important part has not yet appeared. Imagine for a moment something very simple. A silent house. Not the awkward silence, but that deep silence that appears when everything is calm. That moment when the mind stops racing for an instant. Many people don't realize it, but homes have atmosphere. The words spoken within them shape them. Emotions fueled her. The worries too. And the same is true of peace. When a person begins to speak from a place of peace, that inner energy begins to permeate the atmosphere. That is why the ancient sages of the biblical world understood something very particular about words. Words repeated with intention form paths in the heart, and when those words come from a deep spiritual truth, they begin to reshape the way we see life. This is what Psalm 23 reveals, one of its most powerful phrases. A phrase that many read, but few internalize. Guide my steps in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Take a moment to look at that image. It doesn't simply say you will walk. It claims to be guided. Being guided means that not everything depends on your strength, not everything depends on your control. Not everything depends on your calculations. It means there is a direction opening up in front of you. And when a person begins to trust in that direction, their way of facing life changes completely, because you stop living in fear. Start living from a place of trust. And that trust produces something that many have forgotten to cultivate in modern times, clarity. When the mind is full of anxiety, everything seems like a threat. But when the mind rests in confidence, paths begin to appear that were previously unseen. That is why the psalm continues with a phrase that has given hope to entire generations. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Notice what's interesting. It does not say that the valley does not exist. It does not say that the challenges disappear. It says something different. He says that even there, the divine presence remains. And when that certainty enters the heart, something inside the person changes. The reaction to uncertainty is transformed. Fear loses its power. Is gaining ground. But there is another truth that many people have discovered when they begin to pronounce these words with intention. The house begins to feel different. Lighter, more relaxed, more stable, because when a person finds peace, they respond differently to everything that happens around them. And when one person responds differently, the dynamics of the entire household change. Conversation change, decisions change, the way we face challenges changes. That's why many people begin to notice something curious when they incorporate moments of spiritual stillness into their routine. Tensions decrease, impulsive reactions disappear, the clarity is slowly returning. And that's where the phrase appears that most people overlook, but which contains one of the deepest keys to the psalm. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. In the culture of the ancient shepherd, the staff and the crook had two functions. The rod provided protection. The staff guided. Protection and direction. That means that spiritual trust is not passivity. It's safety accompanied by guidance. It's knowing that you don't walk alone, and that even in moments where everything seems uncertain, there is a direction being prepared in front of you. What seemed like silence was purposeful action that you didn't see. Many people discover this truth after long periods of waiting, moments when it seemed that nothing was moving, moments where the answers seemed to take too long. Back over time, they begin to notice something. The pieces are starting to fall into place. The right doors appear. Decisions become clearer, and then they understand that this time of stillness was not abandonment. It was preparation. That's why whispering has something special about it. When you whisper a psalm, you don't say it to convince anyone else. You say it to remember it within yourself. It's an intimate conversation, a moment where the heart realigns with trust. And when that trust strengthens, life begins to reorganize itself in unexpected ways. That's why I want to invite you to do something very simple. If these words resonate with you, write a short sentence in the comments, a personal statement. It could simply be, I walk in peace and trust. It's not just a comment, it's a way of affirming what you decide to cultivate in your life. From today onwards, furthermore, when many people write words of peace in the same place, something special happens. A community of hope is formed. People who remember together that even in difficult times, calm and faith are still possible. And maybe someone reading your comment today needed exactly that phrase. Because sometimes a word of hope arrives at just the right moment. But before we finish, there is a very important part of Psalm 23. Mises INGA, final image that completely transforms the way we understand this message, that it is the most powerful scene in the entire psalm. And when you understand what it really means, you discover why this text has been repeated for centuries in homes all over the world. That we'll see now in the last parts. There is a final scene in Psalm 23 that completely changes the way many people understand this message. So far, we have talked about rest as a guide for protection. But the psalm ends with an image that reveals something even deeper down. Image that speaks of absolute confidence. The text says, You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Pause. For a moment on that scene, it's not a person running, it is not a person struggling desperately. It is a person sitting at the table, peaceful, at peace. Even when there are challenges around, that's what this image represents, a life where external circumstances do not dominate the inner state. And when that peace is established within the heart, something begins to change in everything else. Because peace doesn't just calm the mind, it also makes room for wisdom. Decisions begin to be made from a place of clarity. Relationships become more harmonious. Opportunities are more easily recognized. That's why many people discover something surprising when they incorporate moments of spiritual quiet into their home. The tension begins to dissipate. Anxiety loses its power. The mind stops constantly anticipating problems. And little by little, life begins to feel different, lighter, more organized, clearer. The psalm goes on to say something that has inspired entire generations. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. In ancient tradition, oil represented honor, care, and consecration. It was a sign that someone was being treated with dignity, that his life had value, that their path was being protected. And when a person internalizes that truth, their way of seeing themselves changes. Stop living from a place of emotional lack. Start living from a place of gratitude. And gratitude completely transforms the perspective, because the human mind tends to focus on what is missing. But the grateful heart learns to recognize what is already present. That creates something very powerful. Trust. The last line of Psalm 23 sums it up beautifully. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. Notice something interesting. It does not say that good appears. Occasionally, he says he follows a person. As a constant companion, like a presence that walks beside her. That completely changes the way we see the future. Instead of anticipating difficulties, the heart begins to expect kindness. Instead of living from fear, start living from hope. And when that expectation takes hold in the mind, many decisions begin to change. Because the way we believe the future will be profoundly influences the way we act today. That is why Psalm 23 is not just a spiritual text, it's an emotional guide, a way to reorganize the mind towards confidence. And here appears the last element that many people discover when they whisper it with intention. The whisper transforms words into something intimate. That is a moment where the heart finds peace, where the noise of the day disappears, where the mind stops fighting to control everything. And in that space, peace returns to its place. Close your eyes for a moment. If you can, take a deep breath. Imagine that quiet room again. The warm light coming in through the window. The door in front of you. Now. Imagine that the door opens slowly, and behind it all, you see the life you are calmly, confidently, and purposefully building. It's not a perfect life, but it is a guided life. A life where every step has direction. A life where peace becomes the foundation of every decision. And now, let us say a short prayer together. You can repeat these words silently if you wish. Lord, today I choose to walk in peace. I surrender my worries and trust in your guidance. May my home be a place of calm, wisdom, and hope. May every decision be born from trust, and may the peace you give dwell in my heart each day. Amen. Breathe again, and remember something important. Peace does not always come, because circumstances change. Often circumstances change, because peace first reaches the heart. If this message touched something within you, I invite you to become part of this community, a place where we remember together that faith, calm, and hope remain real forces in everyday life. You can subscribe to the channel and join us for the next meeting. Here we continue exploring messages that strengthen the mind, spirit, and purpose. Because sometimes a single reflection can open an inner door that changes many things, and perhaps today that door began to open